Such beauty doesn't exist where I'm from, I said. The alien woman could only stare. The gateway of dust, the sandstorm had finally settled, leaving behind a fresh layer of rust-colored grit across what remained of the Eastern District. Ash Merrick adjusted his breathing apparatus and checked the salvage scanner strapped to his wrist. Supplies were running dangerously low in Haven Township, and the council had doubled the ration credits for anyone willing to venture this far into the dead zone. Anything worth taking was picked clean years ago, Ash muttered to himself, his voice muffled behind his filtration mask. At 26, he'd spent more than half his life as a salvager, and the wasteland that Earth had become held few surprises anymore. The scanner pulsed faintly, detecting trace metals beneath a collapsed structure. Ash sighed and began clearing debris, his gloved hands working methodically. The building had once been some kind of research facility. He could tell from the reinforced walls and specialized equipment scattered among the ruins. 3 hours of digging rewarded him with a few salvageable power cells and some copper wiring, hardly worth the journey. As he prepared to head back, his scanner suddenly shrieked with an intensity he'd never witnessed before, the readout spinning wildly before shorting out completely. "What the?" he began, before the ground gave way beneath him. The fall should have killed him. Instead, Ash found himself suspended in midair, surrounded by a strange violet light that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Below him, a perfect circle of swirling energy replaced what should have been solid earth. Before he could process what was happening, the light contracted sharply, pulling him downward into its center. Consciousness returned slowly. Ash blinked, expecting the familiar burn of toxic air against his eyes. Instead, he found himself lying on soft ground covered with moss that seemed to glow with gentle blue light. He sat up abruptly, reaching for his breathing mask, only to find it gone. Panic surged through him until his lungs filled with air so clean it almost hurt to breathe. "Impossible," he whispered, looking upward, where there should have been the perpetual haze of Earth's ruined atmosphere. A violet sky stretched endlessly, dotted with 2 moons and stars that formed patterns he'd never seen before. Ash struggled to his feet, turning slowly to take in his surroundings. Towering crystalline formations rose from the landscape, reflecting and refracting light in hypnotic patterns. The vegetation, if it could be called that, pulsed with bioluminescence, creating pathways that wound between pools of luminous liquid. In the distance, structures that seemed grown rather than built rose organically from the terrain, their surfaces shimmering with iridescent colors. "Where am I?" he asked aloud, his voice sounding alien even to his own ears. A soft rustling came from behind a nearby formation of crystal. Ash froze, hand automatically reaching for the blade he kept at his hip. A figure emerged slowly from behind the crystal, moving with fluid grace that immediately struck him as inhuman. She, and Ash could only think of the being as female, stood slightly taller than him. Her skin was a soft lavender that seemed to shimmer with tiny points of light, like stars suspended just beneath the surface. Her features were almost human, yet subtly different, more refined, with large eyes that reflected the surrounding bioluminescence like mirrors. Those eyes now regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "Hello," Ash ventured, lowering his hand from his weapon. I don't know how I got here." The purple-skinned woman tilted her head, studying him. When she spoke, her voice carried a musical quality that seemed to resonate directly in his mind, rather than through the air. "You came through the ancient doorway," she said, each word carefully formed as if she was remembering a language long unused. "No one has come through in many generations." Ash swallowed hard. "I'm from Earth. There was some kind of portal." "Earth," she repeated, the words sounding like a distant memory. "The broken world." "Not all of it is broken," Ash replied defensively, though even as he spoke he realized how hollow his words sounded. He glanced around at the vibrant, pulsing life surrounding them. "Such beauty doesn't exist where I'm from," he said softly. The alien woman could only stare, her luminous eyes fixed not on the landscape she'd known all her life, but on him, a creature from a world she'd only heard about in ancient warnings. Foreign stars days passed in what Ash could only describe as a waking dream. The alien woman, who called herself Nayara, had brought him to her settlement, a collection of crystalline dwellings that grew from the living landscape itself. The community was small, perhaps 30 beings in total, all with the same lavender skin that shimmered with starlight patterns unique to each individual. "My people are the Luminae," Nyara explained as she guided him through gardens where plants responded to touch by changing colors. We have lived on Elysium for thousands of cycles in harmony with the world spirit. Ash followed her, conscious of the distrustful glances from other Lumini. Why are they afraid of me? Nyara paused beside a pool where floating orbs of light drifted just above the surface. Our histories speak of humans who once found their way here. They tried to take rather than understand. She touched one of the orbs, which brightened at her touch. But that was long ago. I believe we can learn from each other now. As a botanist and keeper of the memory gardens, Nyara had been assigned to study the human visitor. Each day she showed Ash another wonder of Elysium, while asking endless questions about Earth. Ash found himself struggling to describe the barren wasteland his home had become. How could he explain toxic rain and dead oceans to someone who lived in such harmony with her world? I want to show you something special, Nyara said one evening, leading him to a secluded grove where massive crystalline trees towered overhead. This is the Remembrance Glade. The trees hold memories. Ash watched in amazement as Nyara placed her palm against one of the trees. The crystal became transparent, revealing flowing images within, scenes of Lumini history, beautiful and strange. Can I? He gestured toward the tree. Yes. She smiled. But be prepared. The trees respond to emotion. When Ash touched the crystal, the surface rippled beneath his fingertips. Images flickered inside, not of Elysium but of Earth. Not the broken Earth he knew, but Earth as it once was. Oceans teeming with life. Forests stretching endlessly, skies clear and blue. How is this possible? He whispered. The trees remember all worlds connected to Elysium, Nyara explained, her voice softening. This is what your world once was. Tears formed in Ash's eyes, surprising him. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. I've only seen pictures. Nobody alive remembers Earth like this. Nyara's hand covered his on the crystal surface. The warmth of her touch sent a current through him, unlike anything he'd experienced. The tree responded, its glow intensifying, images blending memories from both worlds. Your world could heal, she said gently. The Lumini know ways to restore life. Later that night, Ash sat at the edge of the settlement, gazing up at unfamiliar constellations. Nyara joined him, a graceful silhouette in the soft light of Elysium's twin moons. You're troubled, she observed. I keep thinking about what you said, about healing Earth. He turned to her. Would your people share that knowledge, after what humans did before? Nyara was silent for a long moment. The Council of Elders would need to approve. Many fear reopening the connection between our worlds. And what do you think? Ash asked, suddenly very aware of how close she sat beside him. I think, she began, then seemed to reconsider her words. Instead, she reached up, touching his face with gentle fingers that left trails of shimmering light on his skin. I think that sometimes the universe brings together exactly what is needed, when it is needed. The luminescence of her skin brightened slightly, revealing the intricate patterns that made her uniquely Nyara. Ash found himself mesmerized, not by the alien beauty of Elysium, but by her, this being from another world who looked at him and saw not just a survivor from a ruined planet, but something more. When their lips met, the world around them seemed to brighten. Ash felt a connection that transcended the physical, as if their very essences were intertwining, sharing memories, hopes, and dreams that words could never express. For the first time since arriving on Elysium, he stopped thinking of Earth as home. Patterns of light. The council chambers pulsed with tense energy as the 7 elders of the Lumini sat in a perfect circle, their attention fixed on Ash. Nyara stood beside him, her usual calm demeanor replaced by nervous determination. You ask much. Human, said the eldest, whose skin patterns had faded to pale blue with age. The last time our worlds connected, death came to Elysium. I understand your concerns, Ash replied, struggling to maintain eye contact with beings whose gaze seemed to pierce directly into his thoughts. But I'm not asking for myself. Earth is dying. Your knowledge could save millions of lives and restore a world. Why should we risk our peace for a species that destroyed their own home? Challenged another elder, her voice sharp with suspicion. Before Ash could respond, Nyara stepped forward. I have shared memories with this human. His heart holds no deception. She gestured to the crystal wall behind the council, which began displaying the images they had witnessed in the remembrance glade. The earth was once as beautiful as Elysium. It could be again. Murmurs spread through the chamber as the elders communicated in their own language, a symphony of musical tones that Ash couldn't begin to comprehend. Finally, the eldest spoke again. "We will consider your request. Until then, you are welcome to remain among us, Ash Merrick of Earth." As they left the chambers, Ash felt the weight of possibility pressing down on him. "Do you think they'll agree?" Nyara's expression was troubled. "I don't know. There are complications I haven't told you about." She led him to a secluded alcove overlooking one of Elysium's luminous lakes. In the distance, massive floating islands drifted through the sky, trailing veils of light. "The portal you came through isn't just a doorway between worlds," she explained. "It's part of a living network that connects to many realms. Our ancestors sealed most connections after the last human incursion, but the network has been destabilizing for generations." "What does that mean?" "It means," came a new voice, "that your arrival may doom us all." They turned to find Talon, the head of the Guardian Order and Nyara's former bond partner, approaching with several other Lumini. His star patterns pulsed with barely contained anger. "The energy fluctuations have increased tenfold since the human arrived," Talon said, addressing Nyara while pointedly ignoring Ash. "The elders may deliberate while Elysium crumbles, but I cannot stand by." "The fluctuations began long before Ash arrived," Nyara countered, moving protectively closer to Ash. "You know this." "Perhaps," Talon conceded, "but his presence accelerates the degradation. He must return to his world immediately, and the portal must be sealed permanently." Ash felt a cold dread spreading through him. If the portal is sealed, there'd be no chance to help Earth. "Your world is not my concern," Talon said coldly. "Elysium is." That night, as they lay together in Nyara's dwelling, a crystalline structure that responded to her emotions by shifting its interior colors, Ash couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Nyara rested her head on his chest, her skin glowing softly in the darkness, creating patterns of light across his body. "If I have to go back," he said quietly, "would you come with me?" The question hung in the air between them. Nyara raised herself on one elbow, looking down at him with eyes that reflected countless stars. "Elysium is part of me, Ash. My connection to this world sustains me." Her fingers traced patterns on his skin. "On Earth I would fade like a flower cut from its roots." Ash pulled her closer, memorizing the feel of her against him, the unique scent of her skin that reminded him of lightning and spring rain, things he'd almost forgotten from his childhood on Earth. "Then I'll stay," he whispered against her hair. "If they'll let me." Nyara's body tensed. "There's something else you should know." She sat up, pulling the crystalline covering around her shoulders. "The Council didn't tell you everything. When a portal destabilizes completely, it doesn't just close, it collapses, taking everything nearby with it." "Including Elysium?" "No," she said, her voice barely audible. "Just the regions near the portal. Including my settlement." Understanding dawned on Ash with terrible clarity. "That's why you brought me here instead of turning me away. You're trying to save your people." Nyara's eyes shimmered with emotion. "At first, yes. But now—" Her voice broke as she reached for him, her fingertips leaving trails of light where they touched his face. "Now I would tear down the stars themselves to keep you safe." As their bodies intertwined once more, the dwelling responded to their emotions, filling with swirling patterns of light that mimicked the deepening connection between them. A human from a dying world and a Lumine fighting to save hers, finding in each other something neither had dared hope for, a future worth fighting for. Outside, unnoticed by the lovers, the violet sky of Elysium rippled with energy as the first cracks began to form in the fabric of reality itself. Fading horizons dawn broke over Elysium with ominous beauty. The twin moons hung unnaturally close in the sky, their surfaces marred by visible fractures that hadn't been there the day before. Throughout the settlement, Lumini gathered in anxious clusters, their skin patterns pulsing with collective fear. "It's happening faster than we predicted," Talon announced as he strode into the central gathering space where Ash and Nyara stood with the Council of Elders. "The portal network is collapsing. We have 12 cycles at most before catastrophic failure." The eldest elder's voice trembled as she spoke. "We must evacuate to the interior territories immediately." "And what about Earth?" Ash demanded. If the portal collapses, we lose any chance to share your knowledge. The decision has been made, Talon said firmly. The portal will be sealed once all Lumini have evacuated. Your world's fate is not our responsibility. Nyara stepped forward, her luminescence flaring with determination. There may be another way. All eyes turned to her. The ancient texts speak of stabilizing the network by synchronizing the energy signatures from both connected worlds. A theory, Talon dismissed. Never proven. Because it requires something we've never had, Nyara countered. A willing participant from the other side. She looked at Ash. Someone who could return to Earth and activate the dormant node there. A heavy silence fell over the gathering. Finally, the eldest elder spoke. What would this require? Hours later, Ash stood with Nyara in the remembrance glade, watching as she carefully extracted crystalline essence from the memory trees. Her movements were precise, reverent. These crystals contain the knowledge your world needs, she explained, placing them in a small container that pulsed with its own light. Plant restoration, atmospheric cleansing, water purification. The work will take generations. But Earth can heal. Ash took the container, its weight seemingly impossibly light for the hope it contained. And the stabilization? Nyara's expression grew solemn. I've embedded the activation sequence within the largest crystal. Once planted at the Earth portal site, it will establish a harmonic resonance with our network. She hesitated. But Ash, you need to understand what this means. I can never come back, he said quietly. Not exactly. She touched his face, leaving trails of light that faded slowly. The portal will remain but dormant. It could only be reopened after Earth has healed enough to maintain the connection without destabilizing it. How long? Decades. Perhaps centuries. Her voice broke. More than a human lifetime. The realization settled over him like a physical weight. To save both worlds, he would have to leave Elysium, leave Nyara, knowing he would never see her again. That night, as the skies above Elysium fractured with increasing frequency, Ash and Nyara retreated to a sacred pool hidden deep within the crystal forest. The water glowed with bioluminescent life, reflecting their intertwined forms as they moved together one final time. There's something I haven't told you, Nyara whispered against his skin. The stabilization process. It creates an echo between connected souls. Ash pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. What does that mean? It means part of me will always be with you, she said, placing her palm over his heart where a faint pattern of light briefly appeared on his skin. And part of you with me, not enough to cross worlds, but enough to remember. As they held each other beneath alien stars, the settlement prepared for evacuation, and two worlds hung in precarious balance, waiting for a choice that would echo across realities. Morning came too quickly. The portal site, once a perfect circle of energy, now pulsed erratically, sending shockwaves through the surrounding landscape with each fluctuation. Most of the Lumini had already departed for the interior territories, leaving only the Council, Talon's guardians, and Nyara to witness Ash's departure. The sequence is prepared, Talon reported, his former animosity replaced by grim respect. Once activated on both sides, the network should stabilize within 3 cycles. Ash nodded, clutching the container of crystals. He turned to Nyara, whose luminescence had dimmed with sorrow. I'll make sure Earth heals, he promised, even if I don't live to see it completed. Your children will, she said softly. Or their children, and someday, when the worlds are ready. She didn't finish the thought. Their final embrace sent cascades of light rippling across the clearing as their energies resonated one last time. When they separated, Nyara pressed something into his hand, a small crystal pendant that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. So, you never forget what's possible, she whispered, with one last look at the world he'd come to love and the being who had changed him forever. Ash stepped into the fractured portal. The crystal container clutched against his chest as reality dissolved around him. Beyond the veil, the impact of returning to Earth nearly killed him. Ash gasped, choking on the toxic air he'd once been accustomed to breathing. The portal had deposited him exactly where he'd left, the collapsed research facility, now illuminated by the eerie purple glow of the destabilizing gateway. Fighting against the burning in his lungs, Ash scrambled to retrieve his discarded breathing apparatus. Each movement was agony after weeks in Elysium's perfect environment. Once his mask was secured, he turned to the pulsing portal and removed the largest crystal from the container. "Please work," he whispered, placing the crystal at the portal's edge as Niara had instructed. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then the crystal began to sink into the ground, roots of pure energy extending outward to encircle the portal. The erratic pulsing gradually steadied, the violent fluctuations calming into a rhythmic heartbeat. As the final root completed the circle, the portal's glow dimmed to a faint shimmer before disappearing entirely, leaving only a perfectly circular pattern etched into the earth. Ash slumped to the ground, clutching Niara's pendant. Though he could no longer see the portal, he could feel it. Dormant but present, a promise waiting to be fulfilled. 3 years passed. The settlement of Haven Township had initially dismissed Ash's story as radiation-induced hallucination. But the crystals, those they couldn't ignore. The first plantings in the protected biodomes had grown with impossible vigor, purifying the surrounding soil at a rate that defied explanation. Word spread. Other settlements sent representatives to learn the techniques Ash now taught freely. Small pockets of restoration began to appear across the wasteland, islands of green in a dead world. Hope, long forgotten, began to take root alongside the alien plants. Ash now lived alone at the edge of the growing restoration zone, in a simple dwelling built around the dormant portal site. Each night before sleeping, he would hold Niara's pendant and feel the faint echo of her presence, a whisper across dimensions that somehow made the loneliness bearable. On the 5th anniversary of his return, Ash woke to an unexpected sound. Rain falling on his roof. Not the toxic downpours he'd grown up fearing, but clean rain, filtered through atmosphere partially healed by expanding restoration zones worldwide. He stepped outside, removing his breathing mask, now only needed in the worst areas, and turned his face to the cleansing water. The pendant against his chest pulsed suddenly, warm and insistent. Ash looked down to see it glowing with familiar luminescence. When he looked up again, his breath caught in his throat. The rain was illuminating the circular pattern where the portal had been, each drop creating tiny bursts of light as it struck the ground. Within the circle, a translucent image flickered briefly into existence. A familiar landscape of crystal trees and bioluminescent pools. And standing at its center, just for a moment, was Niara. She reached out as if touching glass between them, her fingers leaving trails of light in the air. Though no sound crossed between worlds, Ash could read the words she formed. "We are healing too." The vision lasted only seconds before fading with the rain, but it changed everything. What had been theoretical was now certain. The connection remained. The worlds were gradually finding harmony again. That night, Ash added a new entry to the journal he'd been keeping since his return. A record for future generations who would continue the work long after he was gone. "Today I saw proof that patience can bridge worlds," he wrote. "Earth is healing, and someday, perhaps not in my lifetime, but someday the portal will reopen. When it does, 2 worlds that once feared each other will meet as equals, in balance and understanding." He placed the pendant on the journal page, watching as it cast patterns of light across his words. The echo of Niara remained with him, a constant reminder of what waited beyond the veil of worlds. "Until then," he whispered to the empty air, knowing somehow that across dimensions, she would feel his meaning if not his words. "I carry your light with me." In a crystal dwelling on a distant world, Niara looked up from her work with the stabilization network, touching the place over her heart where a faint human pattern occasionally appeared. She smiled as the sensation of connection washed over her, brief but undeniable. "And I carry yours," she replied to the universe that separated them, knowing with absolute certainty that some bonds transcended even the boundaries between worlds. The rain continued through the night, nourishing seeds from 2 realities that would, in time, grow into a future neither world could have imagined alone.